I'm getting ready to part ways with my lathe. I've been turning for around 5 years, and I thought I would just make a video of basically what I wish I had known when I started. I like to try and make videos that I would have liked to have watched, or that I like to watch. So I'm gonna go in really no particular order except for the first one, through what I wish I had known when I started turning on the lathe. The first thing is, I wish I knew about the existence of a guy named Stuart Batty, B-A-T-T-Y. He has some YouTube videos. He has a PDF that you can find that talks about like the 7 essentials of wood turning, has to do with grain direction, speeds, chucking. He is, in my opinion, just the most incredible wood turning instructor. You may or may not like his work, but he's a great instructor. And I'm an engineer and mechanic by trade and by mind, and he has a very methodical approach, which I really appreciate. I wish I had discovered him. The second thing that I wish I had known was how difficult it would be to sharpen tools. So I am really actually into sharpening. I've been sharpening, hand planes and hunting knives and all kinds of things for a long time. I've had Japanese water stones, normal Arkansas stones, diamond stones, all kinds of things. I love sharpening actually, but I was really surprised at the challenge it would be to sharpen lathe tools. And I think part of that challenge comes from the fact that they're very oddly shaped tools. So like a bowl gouge, it's just quite a bit more complex than a lot of things you might be used to sharpening. And then there's all different, sort of shapes and sizes. And there's some nuance to all of them. So what I would tell my former self is to buy a slow speed grinder with a CBN wheel. So this is basically artificial diamond wheel. The benefit of the diamond is that this wheel always stays perfectly flat. You'd never need to dress the wheel like you would a normal, grit stone. The other thing that's really nice is it never changes in diameter. And that can be really valuable because with this particular system from One Way, it's called the One Way Wolverine. You've probably heard of it if you're into lathes to any extent. You have this arm that goes in here, and what you can do is you can cut you can cut pieces of PVC pipe to go between this pocket and that wheel, so that you can always put this arm at the exact same location every time you set it up. And that's extremely valuable. There's lots of good videos on the internet about that. I won't get into it, but having a wheel that doesn't shrink in size is really nice for that. Also, the wheel cuts very quickly, and it stays nice and cool because this metal surface helps pull some of the heat out of the end of the tool. And again, it cuts quickly, so you're not burning it up. Probably the most underrated sharpening technique, in my opinion, is to take a pen, like a Sharpie, and color the bevel. This seems like something only amateurs would do and beginners would do, and I resisted doing this for a long time. It's so unbelievably helpful because what happens is when you put this tool and you start sharpening, you can immediately see whether you're sharpening, towards the top or towards the bottom, and it can be just an extremely helpful aid. I'll just show you super quick what I mean by that. So you go to do a sharpening, and you can see like, oh, I'm way down here at the heel. I need to pull this thing out a little bit. Then you do it again. You realize like, oh, I'm way up here at the tip. That's no good. It's just an extremely valuable aid. And sharpening is actually something that is, almost like at the molecular level because of burrs and keenness. And yet you can't see those things with the naked eye. And so the colored marker just really helps you begin to visualize and realize what it is you're doing. All right, the next thing that I would have told my former self is to buy inexpensive lathe tools at first, because you can really just eat away at the material when you're learning to sharpen correctly. A really good example of a terrible decision I made. This is a bowl gouge from Thompson. I think it was like $80. And I just lost, I must have ground away an inch or two as I tried to learn how to sharpen it like a total idiot. So buy really cheap tools as you're learning to sharpen. And only once you've learned how to sharpen, go out and buy some good ones. A cheap tool will basically cut as good as a expensive tool when sharpened What it won't do is it won't stay for sharp as long, but that's a small price to pay, again, compared to ruining a bunch of chisels. The next tip that I would give my former self, and this is maybe controversial, but I don't care. I would buy a 1/2-inch bowl gouge and nothing else. No other tools. I would get really, really good with a 1/2-inch bowl gouge. A 1/2-inch bowl gouge can do almost everything that a spindle gouge can do. It can replace your spindle roughing gouge. So basically, you don't have to have this if you have a 1/2-inch bowl gouge. You can do most of the spindle work with a bowl gouge. That's something Stuart Batty talks about. You can do some work that a skew would do, not all. A skew certainly has its place. And a parting tool is probably maybe the second thing that you might want to buy, which are easy to use because this thing can't get into small areas. But if you buy a 1/2-inch bowl gouge and you use it for spindle work and you use it for bowl work and you learn how to sharpen it and you learn how to use it, you will become really a master on the lathe. And then all the other tools are easier to work and easier to use. And one of the great dilemmas when you first start turning is that each tool has a different technique. And so if you're switching from tool to tool to tool and you've not mastered the techniques yet, then it can really be a challenge. And then you also have the challenge of sharpening those tools. So the next thing I would tell my former self is to understand all 4 movements when you're using the lathe. So basically, you have the movement of in and out. You have the movement of a swing to the left and a swing to the right. You have the movement of a twist to the right and a twist to the left. And then you have the movement of dropping and raising. And Stuart Batty talks about these things. When you're doing bowl work, you have to be very conscientious about all 4 movements in order to get certain shapes, and you just won't get those shapes if you're not cognizant of that. So that's really valuable. Going along with Stuart Batty's recommendations, one of the things I was really surprised of with wood turning is all of the variables. You have how fast the wood is turning, you have the material of the wood itself, you have the geometry of the tool, you have the sharpness or keenness of the tool, you have the technique. There's so many things that are going on, and when you're new and you don't know what you're doing yet, it's hard to identify which thing isn't working. So when the tool's not cutting, it could be because of the speed, it could be because of the sharpness, it could be because of the technique, and it's really hard to isolate those things and know which one is giving you the trouble. And so you want to try and eliminate as many variables as possible. You can do that with, proper wood speed, and you can do that with sharpness, but these are all things that, I, again, wish I had known. The next thing I would tell my former self is to go out and buy these little things of sandpaper. They're so handy. And if you're like me and you're a little OCD, just the waste that comes from, tearing up sandpaper sheets can be maddening. So these things are just really helpful. And then probably the last thing that I would tell my former self is don't get too obsessed with using a chuck and all the different tailstock options and headstock options and, using a drill chuck and just all of this. Like, just start simple and small. Just get, I'm blanking on what these things are called. The spur. Just get a spur for the headstock, get a spur for the tailstock, get used to doing spindle work, get yourself a face plate. Where am I? Just get yourself a cheap faceplate. Doesn't really matter. You'll be able to do bowl work on that, and don't worry about getting a chuck right away. I know it's exciting. I know all the jaws are exciting, but I think you will be a better turner with a better foundation if you just start like the old timers did, between the spindles, or spindle turning between the 2 stocks, and then faceplate turning. Just get good at that before you start buying all these other accessories. You start introducing all this extra variation, and with that variation comes problems that are hard to isolate, and get down to the bottom of. Last thing, and this is kind of just a funny extra credit one, is I always saw people sanding on the lathe. I thought that was so fun because I hate sanding, and I thought, oh, that's great. The lathe is spinning at a bajillion, RPMs, and you get to, sand super easy. But what you don't realize with spindle work is that when you sand something that's on the lathe like this, you are sanding against the grain. and so you're sanding cross grain and you get scratches. And so the best sanding when you're doing spindle work, which is when you're between these two things, not bowl work, is to actually stop the lathe and sand this direction with the grain. You'll get a better result. And yeah. All right. Well, I hope that was helpful. It was kind of impromptu, but those are the things that I've learned. Those are the things that I wish I had known. If you have any questions, leave me a comment below. I'm happy to answer it. I've been turning for about 5 years, so, I'm no pro, but I have learned a lot. I've probably made 100 projects on the lathe, and I'm more of the engineer type of person than the artsy type of person. And so I tend to have a methodical approach to things, and perhaps that's helpful to somebody out there. If not, give it a thumbs down. Won't hurt my feelings a bit. Other than that, have a fantastic day.